The letter arrived on a Tuesday, its crisp white envelope slicing through my life like a guillotine. Effective immediately, it read, "Your services as Chief of Staff to Mayor Harold Grayson are no longer required." My hands shook as I stood in my tiny Portland, Maine, apartment, the words blurring into a cold truth. I'd been fired for coming out. I was 25, ambitious, and had clawed my way into City Hall with a mix of grit and charm. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I'd spent 2 years pouring my soul into that job, crafting policies, managing crises, and enduring Mayor Grayson's temper. He was a towering figure in our coastal town of Port Haven, a man whose conservative values clashed with the changing tides of 2015. I'd kept my truth buried, knowing his views on traditional family values. But love has a way of unraveling secrets. When I introduced my boyfriend, Lucas, at a city fundraiser, his hand warm in mine, his smile brighter than the chandelier lights, whispers spread like wildfire. By Monday, I was out. The betrayal stung deeper than the job loss. I trusted Grayson, admired him even, despite his rigid edges. I'd seen him charm voters with his deep voice and firm handshake, a 50-something widower who wore his authority like a second skin. But that letter, signed in his meticulous script, felt personal. It wasn't just about policy or optics. It was about me, Ethan, the kid who dared to love openly. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, my heart pounding. Lucas found me that evening, sitting on the floor, staring at the harbor through my window. "Ethan, you're enough," he said, kneeling beside me, his hazel eyes steady. Lucas Harper was 27, a graphic designer with curly blonde hair and a laugh that could melt ice. He'd moved to Port Haven from Boston, chasing a quieter life, and found me instead. "We'll fight this," he said, his voice fierce. "You don't deserve this." But Port Haven wasn't ready for us. The town, with its lobster boats and salt-worn docks, clung to tradition like a life raft. My firing wasn't just a scandal. It was a warning. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Even my landlord, Mrs. Delaney, a sweet woman in her 70s, started asking pointed questions about household arrangements. I felt like a stranger in the place I'd called home. I needed a plan. Lucas suggested moving to Boston, where he had connections, but I wasn't ready to run. Port Haven was my home. My parents had raised me here, in a clapboard house on Maple Street, teaching me to fight for what mattered. So I stayed. I took a job at a local bookstore, the Rusty Anchor, owned by a kind lesbian couple, Mara and Claire. The pay was a fraction of my old salary, but their warmth was a lifeline. "You're not alone, Ethan," Mara said one day, sliding a coffee across the counter. "This town's got a heart, even if it's buried under Grayson's ego." The bookstore became my sanctuary. I shelved novels, rang up customers, and started a small reading group for queer youth. It was Claire's idea. She'd seen too many kids like me, hiding who they were. The group met weekly in the store's back room, a cozy space with mismatched chairs and fairy lights. There, I met Jamie, a 17-year-old with a sharp wit and a secret. They were non-binary, terrified to tell their parents. "What if they kick me out?" Jamie whispered one night, their dark eyes wide. I didn't have easy answers, but I listened. I shared my story, and slowly, the group became a haven for kids like Jamie, kids like I'd been. Meanwhile, Lucas was my rock. He'd cook dinner, burnt pasta half the time, but I loved his effort, and we'd talk late into the night about dreams bigger than Port Haven. He wanted to start his own design studio. I wanted to make a difference, maybe in politics again. But Grayson's shadow loomed. His re-election campaign was in full swing, and his billboards, smiling, authoritative, promising stability, were everywhere. Each one felt like a slap. One night, at a town hall meeting, I couldn't stay silent. Grayson was speaking, his voice booming about protecting our values. I stood, heart racing, and called out, "What about fairness, Mayor? You fired me for who I love. How's that protecting anyone?" The room went silent. Grayson's face reddened, but he deflected, muttering about personnel decisions. The crowd murmured, some supportive, some hostile. Lucas squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "You did good." That moment sparked something. I started writing op-eds for the local paper, blog posts, anything to share my story. The Portland Press-Herald picked up one piece, titled "Fired for Love," and it went viral in our small corner of Maine. Messages poured in, some hateful, but many from people who'd felt silence too. A woman named Rosa, a teacher, wrote about hiding her girlfriend from her school board. A fisherman named Tom shared how he'd lost friends after coming out. I realized Port Haven wasn't just Grayson's town. It was ours too. By spring 2016, the reading group had grown. Jamie came out to their parents, who, after tears and talks, accepted them. We celebrated with pizza and bad karaoke at the bookstore. But Grayson's campaign was gaining steam, and rumors swirled he'd push for policies targeting queer rights if re-elected. I couldn't let that happen. With Lucas's help, I organized a rally outside City Hall. Nothing huge, just 50 people with signs reading "Love is not a crime" and "Equality for Port Haven." Mara and Claire brought coffee. Jamie brought their courage, speaking publicly for the first time. Grayson didn't show, but his deputy, Ellen Carter, did. She was a quiet woman in her 40s, always in the mayor's shadow. "I hear you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm listening." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Lucas and I went home that night, exhausted but hopeful, tangled in each other's arms. "We're not done," he murmured. I nodded, feeling the fight in me grow. The rally marked a turning point, but Port Haven wasn't transformed overnight. Grayson won re-election in November 2016, his victory speech heavy with promises to preserve our way of life. I watched it on TV, my stomach twisting. Lucas sprawled on our couch, threw a pillow at the screen. "He's insufferable," he muttered. But we didn't have time to sulk. The bookstore group was growing, and so was our resolve. I started volunteering with a statewide LGBTQ+ advocacy group, Maine Equality Now, based in Portland. They were pushing for stronger anti-discrimination laws, and I found purpose in their mission. My days were split between shelving books, meeting with queer youth, and driving to Augusta for strategy sessions. Lucas came along when he could, sketching protest signs with bold colors and sharper messages. "You're a natural organizer," he told me one night, his hands smudged with paint. "Grayson didn't break you, but the fight wasn't easy." Hate mail started arriving at the bookstore, and signed letters calling me unnatural or worse. Mara burned them in the alley, her jaw tight. "Cowards," she said. Claire, softer but no less fierce, started locking the shop's doors after dark. I hated that my presence put them at risk, but they wouldn't hear of me leaving. "Your family," Claire said, squeezing my shoulder. Their support kept me grounded, but the threats wore me down. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake by staying. Then came the fire. It was January 2017, a bitter Maine winter. I got a call at 2 a.m. from Mara, her voice shaking. "The bookstore's burning." Lucas and I raced to Water Street, where flames licked the night sky. The rusty anchor's front window was shattered, the shelves inside charred. Firefighters battled the blaze, but the damage was done. The police called it arson, likely a hate crime, though they had no leads. Standing in the snow, watching our sanctuary burn, I felt rage and grief collide. Jamie was there, tears streaming down their face. "Why do they hate us?" they asked. I had no answer. The community rallied. A crowdfunding campaign raised enough to rebuild, and volunteers, straight, queer, old, young, showed up to clear debris. Even Ellen Carter, the mayor's deputy, stopped by with coffee and donuts. "This isn't who we are," she said, her eyes meeting mine. I wanted to believe her, but Grayson's silence was deafening. He issued a vague statement about condemning violence, but never visited the site. His absence spoke louder than words. Rebuilding took months. Lucas designed a new logo for the bookstore, a phoenix rising from an open book, and it became our symbol of resilience. By summer, the rusty anchor reopened, brighter and bolder, with a mural of diverse faces on its exterior. The reading group resumed, now with 20 kids, including a shy trans girl named Lila who reminded me of myself at 15. I started mentoring her, helping her navigate her parents' unease. "They'll come around," I told her, hoping I was right. Meanwhile, Maine Equality Now was gaining traction. I helped draft a bill to protect queer workers from discrimination, and we lobbied hard in Augusta. I testified before a state committee, my voice steady as I recounted my firing. "No one should lose their livelihood for who they love," I said, locking eyes with a senator who'd once supported Grayson. The room was quiet, the air heavy with my truth. Lucas sat in the back, sketching me in his notebook, his pride palpable. The bill passed in early 2018, a small victory that felt monumental. Port Haven's paper ran a front-page story, and for the first time my name was tied to change, not scandal. But Grayson's influence lingered. He opposed the bill privately, calling it unnecessary, and his allies on the city council blocked local protections. I realized then that change wasn't just about laws. It was about hearts. Lucas and I grew closer through the chaos. He proposed one night, out of the blue, on a pier overlooking the harbor. No ring, just his hand in mine and a nervous grin. "Marry me, Ethan. Let's build something unstoppable." I said yes, laughing through tears, the stars above us brighter than ever. But same-sex marriage, while legal, wasn't fully embraced in Port Haven. We'd need the mayor's signature on our certificate, and the thought of Grayson holding that power made my skin crawl. We planned a small wedding for summer 2019, inviting Mara, Claire, Jamie, Lila, and a few others. I didn't expect Grayson to be involved, but fate had other plans. Ellen Carter, now a counselor, approached me at a community event. "I'm running for mayor next year," she said quietly. "I want your support." Her eyes were earnest, and I saw an ally where I'd least expected one. "Help me change this town," she said. I nodded, unsure but intrigued. Ellen's campaign became my new focus. She was different from Grayson, thoughtful, open to dialogue, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. At 45, she'd spent years in his shadow, but her quiet strength was emerging. I joined her team as a volunteer, crafting speeches and knocking on doors. Lucas designed her campaign logo, a lighthouse beaming over Port Haven's harbor, symbolizing hope. "You're back in the game," he teased, kissing my forehead. Felt like redemption. But Grayson wasn't going down without a fight. His campaign leaned harder into fear-mongering, with flyers warning that radical change would ruin Port Haven. At a debate, he sneered at Ellen, calling her soft on tradition. I sat in the audience, my jaw tight, as he dodged questions about the bookstore fire. Ellen countered calmly, citing the new state laws and her plan for inclusivity. Port Haven deserves better, she said, her gaze sweeping the room. I clapped until my hands hurt. The campaign wasn't just about politics. It was personal. Grayson's allies targeted me, digging up my old op-eds and twisting them into anti-family rhetoric. One night, someone spray-painted "freak" on our apartment door. Lucas scrubbed it off, cursing under his breath, but I saw the worry in his eyes. "We're stronger than this," I told him, though my own doubts crept in. Jamie and Lila showed up the next day with paint and brushes, turning the door into a canvas of rainbows and stars. "They don't get to win," Jamie said, their voice fierce. By spring 2019, the wedding was weeks away. Mara and Claire offered the Rusty Anchor as a venue, but we chose a park near the harbor, wanting the open sky. Lucas obsessed over details: flowers, music, even the shade of blue for our suits. I loved his passion, but I couldn't shake the thought of Grayson signing our certificate. Maine law required the officiant or town clerk to file it, and Grayson, as mayor, could step in. The irony was bitter. The man who'd fired me now held a piece of my future. I confronted him at a council meeting, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Will you sign my marriage certificate, Mayor?" I asked, standing tall. The room hushed. Grayson's face was unreadable, his fingers tapping his desk. "That's a procedural matter," he said, deflecting. I pressed, "It's a human matter. Will you do it?" He didn't answer, but his silence felt like a challenge. Ellen's campaign gained momentum. Polls showed her neck and neck with Grayson, and our rallies drew bigger crowds. At one, Lila spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "I'm trans and I'm proud," she said, holding Jamie's hand. The crowd cheered, and I saw tears in Mara's eyes. Lucas leaned against me, whispering, "This is why we fight." I nodded, my heart full but heavy. Change was close but not certain. The wedding day arrived in July 2019, a perfect summer morning. The park was alive with color, wildflowers, laughter, and the scent of the sea. Lucas looked radiant in his gray suit, his curls catching the sunlight. I wore navy, my hands shaking as I pinned a boutonniere to his lapel. Mara officiated, her voice warm and steady, while Claire played guitar. Jamie and Lila scattered petals, giggling. The crowd was small but vibrant, a mix of bookstore regulars and advocacy friends. When we said our vows, I forgot Grayson, forgot the pain. "Ethan," Lucas said, his voice breaking, "you're my home, my fight, my everything." I choked up, promising to love him through every storm. We kissed, and the crowd erupted, clapping and whistling. But the certificate loomed. Ellen, now a friend, had warned me Grayson might insist on signing it himself, a power move to reassert control. Days later, I walked into City Hall, Lucas at my side, to file the paperwork. Grayson was there, behind the clerk's desk, his face a mask of formality. "I'll handle this," he said, taking the certificate. My stomach dropped. Was this his final jab, a chance to deny us? He signed it slowly, his pen scratching the paper, then handed it back without a word. I looked at the signature, Harold Grayson, Mayor, and felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. Ellen won the election in November 2019, a narrow victory that shook Port Haven. Grayson left office quietly, retreating to his law practice. The town felt lighter, but I couldn't forget his signature on our certificate. It was a paradox. The man who'd cast me out had, in some small way, validated my love. Lucas framed the certificate, hanging it in our living room. "It's ours," he said. "Not his." Ellen's inauguration in January 2020 was a new dawn. The town square buzzed with hope, and I stood with Lucas, Jamie, and Lila, watching her swear to serve all of Port Haven. Her first act was a proclamation declaring June Pride Month, a bold move for a town still healing. The Rusty Anchor hosted a celebration, with Mara and Claire raising rainbow flags. I felt proud but restless. Grayson's signature still gnawed at me, a reminder of unfinished business. I took a job with Ellen's administration, not as chief of staff, but as a community outreach coordinator. It was a chance to shape Port Haven, to ensure no one else faced what I had. Lucas launched his design studio, working from a loft above the bookstore. His first big project was a citywide campaign promoting inclusivity, with posters of diverse faces, mine included, plastered across town. "You're a local celebrity," he teased, but I saw the impact. Kids like Lila walked taller, unafraid. Still, Grayson's presence lingered. He was no longer mayor, but his law firm represented powerful clients, and he wielded influence behind closed doors. Rumors spread that he was funding opposition to Ellen's policies, including a proposed ordinance to protect queer businesses. I confronted him at a Chamber of Commerce event, unable to hold back. "Why can't you let this town move forward?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He looked older, his eyes tired. "I did my job," he said. "You're the one making it personal." His words stung, but I saw something new, regret, maybe, or doubt. Life with Lucas was my anchor. We settled into married life, cooking dinners, arguing over paint colors for our apartment, and dreaming of a bigger future. He wanted kids. I wasn't sure, haunted by the fear of raising a child in a world that could still be cruel. But Lucas's optimism was infectious. "We'll teach them to be brave," he said, kissing my temple. I wanted to believe him. The bookstore group evolved into a nonprofit, Haven's Heart, with me as its director. We offered counseling, job training, and safe spaces for queer youth. Jamie enrolled in college, studying social work, while Lila became our unofficial spokesperson, her confidence blooming. But challenges remained. A local church, led by one of Grayson's allies, started a petition against our programs, calling them indoctrination. We fought back with community forums, inviting parents to hear our stories. Some listened, others walked out. Change was slow, but it was happening. In 2021, a new crisis hit. A queer teen, Marcus, ran away from home after his parents rejected him. He showed up at Haven's Heart, scared and hungry. We took him in, found him a foster family, and worked with social services to keep him safe. His story hit me hard. It could have been me years ago. I reached out to Ellen, who secured funding for emergency shelters. "You're saving lives," she told me. I hoped so, but Marcus's fear stayed with me, a reminder of how much work remained. Grayson's name resurfaced that fall. He'd written an op-ed in the local paper, not about politics but about his late wife, Sarah, who died of cancer a decade earlier. It was raw, vulnerable, unlike anything he'd shared before. He mentioned regret, choices he wished he'd made differently. I read it twice, wondering if I was one of those regrets. Lucas scoffed. He doesn't get a redemption arc just for writing a sob story. But I wasn't so sure. People could change. Couldn't they? I saw Grayson again at a town festival, standing alone by a food truck. He looked out of place, no longer the commanding mayor. I approached, my heart pounding. "Why did you sign it?" I asked, no preamble. He knew I meant the certificate. He looked at me, his eyes heavy. "It was my duty," he said, "and I owed you." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. I nodded, unsure what to feel, and walked away. By 2022, Port Haven was changing. Ellen's policies were taking root, and Haven's heart was thriving. Lucas and I started fostering a queer teen, a 15-year-old named Riley, who loved art and bad puns. They filled our home with laughter and chaos, and I began to see what Lucas meant about building a family. But Grayson's shadow never fully faded. His firm still fought Ellen's reforms, and I wondered if his moment of candor was just a fleeting crack in his armor. Riley changed everything. At 15, they were a whirlwind of energy, sketching murals on our walls with permission and challenging us with questions about love, identity, and justice. Lucas adored them, teaching them graphic design, while I helped with homework and hard conversations. Fostering wasn't easy. Riley had nightmares, scars from a family that couldn't accept them, but it gave us purpose. "You're stuck with us?" Lucas told them, ruffling their hair. Riley grinned, and I felt our little family take shape. Haven's heart grew too, opening a second location in a neighboring town. We trained volunteers, expanded counseling, and launched a scholarship for queer youth. Jamie, now 20, returned as a summer intern, their confidence a far cry from the scared teen I'd met. Lila, 18, was applying to art school, inspired by Lucas. But the church's petition gained traction, and Grayson's firm was rumored to be funding it. I needed answers. I requested a meeting with Grayson, expecting resistance. To my surprise, he agreed, inviting me to his office. It was stark, all polished wood and old photos, a far cry from City Hall's bustle. At 60, he looked worn, his gray hair thinning. "What do you want, Ethan?" he asked, his voice neutral. I didn't hold back. "Your firm's fighting my nonprofit." "Why?" He leaned back, studying me. "Business isn't personal," he said. "But I don't hate you. Not anymore." I pressed, asking about the certificate, about his regrets. He hesitated, then said, "I was wrong about you. I thought you were a threat. I was afraid." Afraid? The word didn't fit the man I'd known. He spoke of Sarah, how her death had hardened him, how he'd clung to control to cope. Firing me, he admitted, was a mistake born of fear, not malice. "I signed your certificate because it was right," he said, "and because I wanted to." It wasn't a full apology, but it was raw, real. I left his office shaken, unsure if I could forgive, but certain he was no longer my enemy. Port Haven's Pride Month in 2023 was our biggest yet. The park was a sea of rainbows, with music, food trucks, and speeches. Ellen spoke, her voice steady, promising more protections. Riley performed a poem, their words fierce and hopeful, while Lucas and I cheered, arm in arm. Mara and Claire ran a booth for the Rusty Anchor, and Jamie and Lila led a youth march. For the first time, I felt Port Haven was truly ours. But the fight wasn't over. The church's petition led to a council vote on defunding queer programs. We mobilized, packing the meeting with supporters. I spoke, recounting Marcus's story, Riley's my own. "This town saved us," I said. "Don't let fear take that away." The council voted 4-3 to keep funding, a narrow win. Ellen hugged me after, whispering, "You're unstoppable." Grayson attended the Pride event, standing on the edges, watching. I caught his eye and he nodded, a small gesture. Lucas noticed, raising an eyebrow. "What's his deal?" he asked. I shrugged. "Maybe he's learning." We didn't talk, but his presence felt like a step, however small. By late 2023, Lucas and I decided to adopt Riley. The process was grueling: paperwork, home visits, doubts, but we were committed. Riley's biological family had cut contact, and we wanted to give them a home. The day the judge approved, we celebrated at the harbor, eating ice cream and laughing as Riley sketched the waves. "You're my dad's," they said, and my heart swelled. Grayson's firm withdrew from the church's campaign that winter, a quiet move that made headlines. The paper quoted him, "Port Haven needs unity, not division." I didn't know what changed him, Sarah's memory, our confrontation, or something else, but it mattered. The town was healing, and so was I. In 2024, Port Haven felt like a different place. Ellen's leadership had ushered in new policies: protections for queer businesses, funding for Haven's Heart, and a city-sponsored Pride Festival. The Rusty Anchor was thriving, its mural a landmark for visitors. Lucas's studio was booked solid, and Riley, now 16, was painting a mural for City Hall, their art a bridge between past and future. But I still carried the weight of my firing, a scar that ached in quiet moments. Grayson reached out in spring, asking to meet at a coffee shop. I hesitated but agreed, curious. He looked frail, his hands trembling slightly as he stirred his coffee. "I'm retiring," he said, "and I owe you more than I've given." He spoke of his years as mayor, how fear had driven him, fear of change, of losing control. Firing me, he said, was his lowest moment. "I saw you and Lucas at Pride," he added. "You've built something I couldn't." His apology was halting but sincere. I didn't forgive easily, but I thanked him. "Keep learning," I said, leaving it at that. Haven's Heart expanded statewide, with chapters in Bangor and Lewiston. I traveled for trainings, sharing our story. Lucas and Riley came sometimes, their presence grounding me. At one event, a teen asked how I kept going after being fired. I thought of Grayson's signature, of Lucas's love, of Riley's laughter. "You find your people," I said, "and you fight for them." By summer 2025, Port Haven was unrecognizable from the town that had shunned me. The council passed a resolution naming a park after Haven's Heart, a place for queer youth to gather. At its opening, Ellen cut the ribbon, and Riley unveiled a sculpture, a phoenix, like the bookstore's logo. Lucas squeezed my hand, whispering, "This is yours." I shook my head. "It's ours." Grayson attended the opening, uninvited but welcome. He stood quietly, watching kids play. I approached him, no anger left. "You signed my certificate," I said. "That meant something." He nodded, his eyes misty. "I'm glad I did." We didn't say more, but we didn't need to. His signature, once a symbol of pain, had become a bridge. That night, Lucas, Riley, and I sat on our porch, the harbor sparkling under the moon. Riley was sketching, Lucas was planning a new project, and I was writing a memoir about Port Haven's transformation. The certificate hung on our wall, a reminder of how far we'd come. I'd been cast out, but I'd found my way back, not just to a job, but to a life where love won. The town wasn't perfect. Some still resisted, clinging to old fears. But we'd built something stronger. A community that embraced Jamie, Lila, Riley, and countless others. Grayson's change, however late, showed even the hardest hearts could soften. And as I looked at Lucas, his hand in mine, I knew we'd keep fighting, not just for us, but for every kid who needed a home.